Hi, this is Gary from Rothkopf Law. Welcome. Today my client asked me what I should be looking for in a share purchase agreement, also known as a stock purchase agreement. Basically, this is a contract that says you're purchasing certain shares in a company or perhaps selling shares in a corporation. Now, you want to make sure you nail down the vital terms to the agreement, right? What are you buying? You're buying a certain number of shares. What's the number? And what percentage of the company does that equate to? How many total shares in the company are outstanding? What are the categories of shares? Does the company have preferred shares or only common shares? Do the shares you're purchasing come with voting rights? Now, we're talking about what you're buying. How much are you paying? What is the price per share? And what's the total price that you have to pay on the closing date? Speaking of which, you want to date the contract, but you also want to have a secondary date, and that's the closing date. That's the date when the shares will trade hands, and you're also expected to pay for said shares. Now, the reps and warranties, or representations and warranties, are not to be confused with the recitals. The early part of the contract talks about what the contract is. This is the recital section. It's unenforceable and not crucial to the contract. The reps and warranties are. These say, for instance, that the seller has authority to enter into the transaction. The reps should also state that the company is not party to a lawsuit and is not expected to be sued by any third party, an employee, or anyone else. You do not want to purchase a lawsuit. Finally, you want to know that the company is in good standing, meaning that it doesn't have any debts to the government, for instance. Skip down to the signature line. You want to make sure that the corporation itself is party to the agreement, and somebody or one of the executives of the corporation that has authority to sign has signed off on the agreement. You want this to make sure that the company is following its internal guidelines. And to that end, you want to request a copy of its articles, bylaws, and the shareholder agreement to make sure that those documents are consistent, but also that the share purchase agreement is consistent with the company's own internal documentation. Next, you're going to want to look at a SEC compliance statement or a letter, and this should be a letter from an attorney that says that the transaction is compliant with SEC rules. Now remember, the buying and selling of equity in a corporation like this is a security regulated by the 33 and 34 Act. So you're going to want to fall into either an exception or an exemption so that you don't have to fulfill all the prospectus requirements and so forth. The opinion letter should explain that. Look for the stock certificate to be exchanged and executed. So it should have a transfer signature from the authorized signatory in the company. And that should be an executive, usually a secretary, and maybe a VP or a president as well. Finally, you're going to look to the share log. This is something you should do as part of your due diligence. This isn't the whole thing, but it's part of it. And that share log should say who the shares have previously belonged to, and finally record that transaction to you. Thank you for listening to the video and watching. And if you have any questions, I do welcome your call. Gary Rothkopf, business attorney.